This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This year marks the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. This is the first civil rights law that barred discrimination against people with disabilities. But advocates fear that decades of work for better disability services and more inclusivity could be under threat from federal funding cuts. These services include programs to help people with disabilities find employment, community living, and live independent lives. Today, we get an update on disability services in our state. Later, we'll hear from author, filmmaker, and comedian Crystal Emery. Joining us now in studio is Joy Holder. She's the art director at the Art Connection Studio in Hartford. Thank you so much, Joy, for being with us today.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm excited to be here.
And also with us is Toby Parch-Davies. She's an executive director of Disability Rights Connecticut. Toby, appreciate your time as well.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And for our listeners, you can join the conversation. Let us know if you have any questions or if you would like to share your own story, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Toby, it seems like disability services is currently at a crossroads, and there's been years and years of advocacy to get people with disabilities more support so they can not only live, but also thrive. Can you give us an update on what we're seeing in our state and also around the nation?
Sure. So I started in the field about 30 years ago, right at the time the ADA passed. And in the past 30 years, we've spent a lot of time building more advancement and systems changes to promote community living. And the recent cuts to Medicaid through H.R. 1 really do threaten those services. People with disabilities deserve and have the legal right to live in the community. And the challenge with this bill is shifting the cost to states, which really proposes threats to those supports and services.
And so when it comes to the support and services that you're talking about getting cut, what are you the most concerned about?
I'm most concerned about access to health care. And also discretionary programs like the community waiver programs that allow people to live in the community.
And is part of the concern, especially you mentioning with the funding cuts, so a lot of the pressure is going to be leaning towards the state. Are you concerned about putting more pressure to a system that's already used to doing more with less, but now it's even more and even lesser, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. We're used to doing more with less, and so that's just the fact of the matter, that there are additional advancements we want to see in the service delivery system because it's not a perfect system yet. There are people, many people who lack access still to community services who don't qualify. For example, we have adults who are over the age of 18 who, because they don't meet a certain threshold, are denied access to those community living supports. So there's work that needs to be done there. There are also personal care assistance programs that people are regularly denied medical coverage for the types of supports they need to thrive. As you said, there's a difference between need and thriving. And, just imagine someone who wants to go to work and needs to transfer when they're on the job, or they need to eat at work for lunch. And if they don't have access to those services, how is it possible to work? So there are a variety of scenarios like that, or other issues where it might jeopardize the person's safety, could suffer a fall, and this has actually happened. So that's a challenge to other harm that could be done without access to the proper supports and services people need.
Well, and we mentioned community living a couple times just now. What does that look like here in Connecticut? How do these programs support people with disabilities?
Yeah, so we have a number of different waiver programs. So if one example is personal care attendant waiver, where a person with a physical disability is able to access services in the home or in the community rather than in what would otherwise might be a facility. Another model is the Katie Beckett program for children with severe disabilities who would otherwise require institutional care. They're able to get that nursing support or direct supports that they need in the home, again, rather than a facility. These programs are vital to keep people together as families and also just living the life on their terms the way they want to rather than according to a facility-based program.
Well, so it seems like there's a lot of options that's available.
Yeah, there are options, but I don't want to make that sound like the things are perfect because they're not. There are limitations in those options that are available. And again, the programs I just described are discretionary programs, the waivers.
Well, and I think this is kind of an obvious question here, but how would these cuts to services and programs impact the autonomy that people with disabilities have fought so hard for and perhaps have gotten but might have a chance to lose them?
Yeah. Well, just imagine with the cost shifting from the federal level, Medicaid relies on a match, federal match to state match. And so if there are constraints on the state match and then we can't pull down the federal match because of those constraints, it will cause the state to be in a situation where they have to make, fundamental decisions about how those dollars will get distributed. And that's a problem for the discretionary programs, like I said. So that's going to limit the ability for more people to pursue their choices, such as where they want to work, where they want to live. And those are their legal rights to make those decisions. But if they don't have the support they need to be able to pursue those things, that's going to cause limitations on their personal freedoms.
And Joy, I'm seeing you nod a lot here to what Toby is describing. Can you respond to what she's been sharing about disability services getting cut?
Absolutely. As you're speaking, Toby, I'm thinking about the effects that it'll have on our artists, our clients. They use ADA. I would say 80% of them have to have that public transportation in order to participate in our studio. And without that, a lot of them do live in group homes or don't have access to their family. So they just wouldn't be able to participate in a program that is giving them purpose in their life, giving them that agency, that ability to be participating, people in our community. So as you're speaking, I'm seeing the faces of the people that I work with, and it's pretty scary.
It is scary, Joy, and I'm thinking back to 30 years ago when I started off as a direct support professional, and in those days it was a program, and it was 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week, whatever the person qualified for, and it was only between the days of Monday through Friday. Certain hours of the day. So if a person wanted to go to something like an art program, like you have, and it was offered in the evening, they couldn't go because they didn't have the transportation, they didn't have the direct supports they might need to get there. So these are the kinds of constraints we're concerned about.
It's a lot of the little big things, right? Something like transportation is such a big deal for many communities not being able to get from point A to point B.
Right.
And Joy, you've talked about you're working with artists. Can you describe what your work looks like there?
Yes. So what my work looks like at our Connection Studio, we have about 30 enrolled artists with a capacity for about 60, maybe a little under that. And our day-to-day, we're working from 10 a.m. to pretty much 1:30 p.m. on the arts. They're all visual arts for the most part, whether that's fiber, mixed media, drawing, painting, right now we're going to start learning to crochet. So a pretty diverse array of the visual arts. And we pretty much are trying to get ourselves more out into the community. We have about 4 home shows a year within studio. And we've done about 5 community outside shows from the year of 2025, which is pretty awesome. And pretty much what we do at the studio is making sure that our artists' work is accessible to the community. We advocate on behalf of their art and just making sure that they're represented as just artists because that's what they are and they happen to have a disability or an ailment. That honestly aids in the work that they create. So.
Excellent. I'm so excited to hear that, that you're the whole notion of identifying people as an artist first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just artists.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had different conversations too about that exactly. Understanding the label, but not necessary, right? Especially for this community. And when you talk about helping artists not only develop artistic identity,
Right.
depending on what medium they do, maybe they do all of it, but empowering them to not just be human beings, which is they're human beings, but empowering them to be independent artists. So
Right.
what does that look like for you? How do you go about doing that?
Well, there's so many ways that we can do that we can empower them to be independent artists. A lot of times it's just sitting down and having conversations with them. Some of our artists have even come up to me and had said, hey, I would love to see a show in the 1950s. Like, why don't we make art based on that? And I was like, what an awesome idea. As my job is to come up with the art direction for the next shows, I'm thinking, hey, let's have a Millennium art show or a show by the decades. So hearing them out and their voice, if they come up to me also and our other art, our facilitators and ask, hey, I really want to learn more about this skill. I want to practice on my sewing. Okay, let's schedule out a time to do that. Or in a specific project that we're working on, we just had a glass show. And one of my artists, she wanted to learn more about mosaics. So we put her mostly on mosaics, and now that is the only thing that she wants to do. And that was her right and her voice. She got to choose to do that. So we definitely want to encourage that self-agency and that independence, while also not doing things for them. Yeah, just making sure that, hey, if they are feeling like they're not as good at something, we're there to empower them rather than, hey, let me take this and draw it for you. No, I know you can draw that. Let's start with the basics, shapes, break it down. So just that teaching aspect,
Right.
is really important.
And I mean, I think you're kind of rolling into what I want to dig into next is talking about limitations that we do put on disabled people working as artists as a society, right? We have this I think, misconception or expectation, depending on who you're talking with. Can you talk about that limitation and how that impacts your work, actually? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's something that comes up every day while we work with our artists. One, we have to be aware of their client profiles, all of the abilities that they have so that we can meet them where they're at, but also push them beyond that. Some of our artists are nonverbal, and they may only make abstracted work. And it's gorgeous. So we're pushing them in that area while we have some pretty photorealistic artists who speak eloquently, and so we're going to push them more in that direction as well. Hey, you're going to use more reference photos. Maybe we want to do some live drawings with you. So working with them with their artistic style and their ability as well.
Well, and Toby, we'll love to hear your reaction to this because Joy's working on one particular program for the community. What are your thoughts about being able to use art as a way to help the community?
Oh, I think it's fabulous. And it brings me back to, honestly, 2019 during the pandemic. I have a daughter with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and she has pulmonary issues. So she was really in lockdown for 2 years. And I did everything I could to get people to, pipe in through Zoom. And she had Zoom pottery, she had Zoom tap dancing, and she would literally create these beautiful pieces of pottery with a pottery master. I'm not sure of the proper title.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most beautiful artwork. And she would leave it outside the door, and the artist would come pick it up, bring it to the kiln, and then bring it back to her to paint, and then fire it again, or whatever the process is. And it just brings me right back to that art, the tap dancing and the pottery really helped to get through that tough time.
Well, I think art is something that we all turn to when life is hard, right, and challenging and whatnots. And Joy, can working the arts also be therapeutic for people in general of all abilities? Because it sounds like it's empowering for anyone.
Absolutely, Catherine. I think you touched on something with, everyone kind of returns to art. Before we learned how to write, we were drawing. You know, before we learned how to talk, we were probably singing and making an array of vocal noises that I guess you could call singing. So it's definitely innate, and it is absolutely therapeutic. That's why I'm personally an artist. You know, it's brought me to the point in which I am in my life. But with our artists, you know, there's so much research on how art affects and assists and aids in the betterment of your mental health, your physical health, just your well-being in general.
With us today is Joy Holder, who's an art director at the Art Connection Studio in Hartford, and also Toby Parch-Davies, who's the executive director of Disability Rights Connecticut. If you have a question for our guests about disability services in our state, you can join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. There are more than 44 million people who are disabled in the United States. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The state of disability services is in flux. This includes services for community living and employment support. With us still to talk about this and more is Joy Holder from the Art Connection Studio in Hartford, and also Toby Parch-Davies, who's with Disability Rights Connecticut. So, Toby, I want to jump with you here. We've been talking a lot about efforts that's happening to ensure that people with disabilities are treated with dignity and seen as whole members of society. So there's been a lot of movement, but there's also a lot of sort of going backwards in some sense. Can you talk about what this has looked like in the past and what we're seeing today?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, it's taken decades to get to the point we are now, and we want to retain what we have now and actually advance it. And so the threats to the funding really threaten the very infrastructure that people have access to. So it's really important that people have access and know how to use their legal rights to advocate for themselves. And what I'm thinking about is employment is such an important part. It's of the social fabric of our lives and our own identities is what we do for work. That's the first question that people ask, right? So what your description about the process that you use for getting people to express themselves, helping them facilitate that conversation, it reminds me of this person-centered planning process where just that whole facilitated dialogue, like what do you want to do? What medium do you want to use? What colors do you want to use? That whole process that you described earlier. The person-centered planning process is very much like that. And so for people to realize their own autonomy and self-determination and what they want to do with their life, they need to know their legal rights, how to advocate for themselves, and then put those pieces together so that they can do what they want in their life and in the community. And that's what our infrastructure right now tries to facilitate. But again, we could be in more troubling times in the future.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the person-centered approach, because I was actually curious to hear from Joy, too, because it sounds like that is the approach that you're making with your artists.
Yeah.
Yes. Toby, I'm so glad that you brought that up, and, Catherine, that you're reiterating that, because I think to a lot of the community, people do see, especially physical disability first, rather than the person. And that's why being person-centered is so important, because we're all just humans with an array of identities. And the humans that I get to work with are artists, and they're artists first and foremost. And we will, all the other collections of them that make them then, we'll use that to push them forward in their artistic journey.
Well, can I just give you an example of that? So like a good example would be a person says, I want to pursue my art as my vocation.
Yeah.
So what that would look like is they would, obviously seek out artistic resources. But when it comes to pursuing art as a vocation and self-employment, it involves planning. Like a person may rely on certain benefits they need to be able to actualize their art, financial benefits that they need to maintain their health care. And And there are these things called work incentives, Social Security, Medicaid work incentives, that can be very technical. And so the support system around them can actually facilitate that planning process to give them the art supplies, to demonstrate how they apply their earnings to build their savings they need for their business.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by that person-centered planning process. What's the vocation they want? And then how do we plan supports around them as individuals?
Right.
Well, and of course, we're having this conversation today, but I'm curious to hear from both of you really is it important to have this conversation out in the open, to sort of, I don't know if there's a better word for this, but sort of normalizing that this is a process and that these are our fellow human beings, that just the only difference really is they just need some extra support.
Yeah. I definitely think we should be having this conversation out in the open. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of ideology around, if it doesn't really affect me, then maybe I shouldn't care as much about it. And to counteract that, we need to be, speaking on this as much as possible, because if it affects your fellow neighbor, it should affect you. And in this conversation, that's where I do feel that fear or that the anxiety of my artist, our artist, my coworkers, they're my coworkers too. They will be affected, and that affects me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we all know someone in our life, a sister, a parent, a friend who may have suffered from a car accident. And disability is natural. It's part of the human experience.
Right.
And so the more we normalize that and celebrate the authenticity of people, all people, and how they contribute to society is really important.
And speaking of community, we are currently, I don't know if we're ever really out of it, but we're currently in cold, flu, and COVID season. And so tell us about the efforts to make sure people with disabilities who want to get vaccinated can get vaccinated or be protected. Toby?
Yeah, so DRCT was involved just last week or the week before in advocating along with other organizations in Connecticut to make sure that our vaccines in Connecticut are available despite some restrictions that the feds had announced. And so we issued an advocacy letter to Governor Lamont to please, make sure that we have access to those in Connecticut. And we know from the pandemic that people with disabilities are at much higher risk for severe illness. And so he has issued executive orders to make sure that we have access to the vaccines and that they're also that they're financially covered in insurance in Connecticut.
Well, then, Joy, looking ahead, how can people learn more about Art Connection Studio and how to get involved?
Absolutely. Well, we're always taking volunteers. You can learn more about us on our website and our social medias at Art Connection Studio. If you'd like to be involved, you can also attend our several shows that we have and chat with myself, our program director, Nadira Gillespie. We do have a show coming up this Friday at the Red Brewster Brewery. It's a weekend-long show. It starts at 4. We'll have food, music. The brewery's right there, and beautiful art.
It sounds like you also have poetry readings there as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm like, how did you know about that? So I've started a collaboration with Nadia. I'm forgetting her last name, but she is the poet laureate of Manchester.
Nadia Sims.
Nadia Sims.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
And this will be the first time that Art Connection Studio has done a collaboration like this. I love the written arts. So this is super exciting. They will be responding to all of our artists' artwork and creating poetry based off of that. So I think she's pulling together a whole bunch of poet laureates all over Connecticut. And we'll be doing that, I believe, November 19th.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Everyone is going there and having a party. And so, Toby, we'd love for you to sort of close us off here. Any thoughts that you would like to leave with our listeners based on this conversation we're having?
Well, these are tricky times, and I think it's really important for people who with disabilities and family members and neighbors who care about these issues contact their legislators and talk about the impact that these changes could have on them, and be really active in communicating their interests and educating people about their needs, and supporting people with disabilities. So, yeah, that's what I would say is use your voice.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Toby. You've been listening to Toby Parch-Davies, who's the Executive Director of Disability Rights Connecticut. Toby, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're also listening to Joy Holder, who's the Art Director at the Art Connection Studio in Hartford. Joy, it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure, Catherine.
Coming up, comedian, filmmaker, and author Crystal Emery joins us in the studio. You can also join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. In 1981, New Haven native Crystal Emery was diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a rare form of muscular dystrophy that causes nerve damage to the arms and legs. For some people living with the disease, the symptoms can be limited to body weakness and muscle atrophy. But for Crystal, the disease progressed. She lost the use of her legs and hands. Today, she uses a wheelchair and sometimes needs a breathing machine. But despite these challenges, Crystal remained committed to her craft, working as an artist, author, filmmaker, activist, and even a comedian. Joining us in the studio today is Crystal Emery herself. This Saturday, she'll be performing at the Bergamasque Community Theater in New Haven. Crystal, welcome to Where We Live. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you.
So we just heard a little bit about your background. Can you tell us more about your story?
Which story, right? I have several stories.
Well, maybe
I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, I'm about to do an aerobic video. No, that's a lie. And now I'm a comedian. So which story do you want?
Well, let's rewind a little bit and start from a little bit in the beginning. Can you tell us, when you were diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, how did that come about?
Oh, okay. Which story do you want? When I was dancing on the tables in Germany, or when I was in LA? Charcot-Marie-Tooth is a gradual disease.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to hear beep, beep, because the ventilator, if I start talking, it says that I don't have enough air. So, listeners, if you hear beep, beep, that's just my ventilator singing.
Got it. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Charcot-Marie-Tooth is something that happens gradually. It's also really hard to diagnose. And there's not a lot of information about it. Like, there has not been, a discovery in almost 17 years. So where other diseases have breakthroughs, Charcot-Marie-Tooth is very stubborn. So, I have done entertainment since 5th grade. I wrote and directed my first play in elementary school in Cheshire. So, I was an actress. And when I started walking with a limp, everybody thought it was because I broke my hip. But at that time, they were not hiring handicapped actresses. And I had been doing a little directing, so I switched over to directing. But then I started falling down, and people just said, "Oh, you're clumsy." And then I fell down a lot. And people were like, "Oh, you're extra clumsy." And it was through a series of tests and broken ankles that they diagnosed me when I was in college with Charcot-Marie-Tooth. I went to the University of Connecticut. So this was the Storrs campus. And what happens, somebody tells you have a disease that there's really no information, that it's called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. Well, who the hell is that? You're like, wait a minute, what's going on? But I didn't see myself as a person with a disability or that the language was handicapped. So I just went on and did my thing. I directed plays throughout the United States, and in LA, I was like, you know what, I want to do film. So I went there, came back with NYU for a special program. I decided, the academic way is not the way for me to do film. So I went back to LA and worked for a little bit of everybody. And then I got on a film called Rage in Harlem. And now I'm wearing 2 leg braces, one on my left, on my right. And I'm walking with a cane. But I still don't understand that I'm disabled, right? Because maybe I got to start a little earlier to get dressed. Maybe I can't stand at a table anymore and dance. But it just never stopped me. It wasn't an issue. It just meant I had to work harder.
Well, it doesn't sound like you've stopped since then.
Oh, I have. Like I'm closing my comedy. But one of the things that comedy does is, that's the ventilator. Like, okay, breathe, let me keep talking. So I'm going to take a deep breath.
Yeah, take a moment.
Yeah, okay. The thing that comedy does is you write a lot and then you work with other comedians, but it's not as stressful as making a film. Like I can manage this because breathing is a really important factor in life. And when you only have 50% of your lung capacity, you're not running around a set. So comedy allows me to still entertain, still address issues that are important to me, and still be able to, on days when I'm really, really sick, just stay in bed with the covers over my head.
Well, I think it's amazing that you just said that comedy is easier than film, because I imagine going into comedy is pretty scary. Being funny and making people laugh is kind of scary to me, as everyone around me is laughing because I think we all feel very, very similarly. So that's amazing that you're able to do that, Crystal. And of course, it sounds like you do all of the things. You are a multidisciplinary artist. You've acted, you've performed, you've written, you've directed, you're in comedy now. So when did you get first interested in stand-up comedy?
I'm not sure if I should tell the truth or tell a lie. Okay. Right.
Are we going to play 3 truths and a lie?
Yeah. I don't want to, upset anybody. I just like comedy, right? I probably still don't like most comedians because comedy has to be authentic. You can't write a script, get out there and start reading to people. You have to meet people where they are, because that's what stand-up does. So a year ago, in 2024, I said, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And I bought a book that I never read.
All right, I don't feel too bad about myself sometimes then, if I buy a book and don't read it.
Yeah. And I bought the book and put it on a thing that, you press the button and it scrolls for you. But I never read it. So we were I once bought a ticket for Michelle Buteau. And I do like Michelle Buteau. And then I liked her. Now I love her. Oh my God, I love her. And after the show, well, during the show, he raised his hand. And I said, hey, I want to do stand-up, but I can't stand up. And she started laughing. Because she said, see me after the show. And she said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a few minutes, come back tomorrow. Well, the next day was my dad's anniversary of his birthday. And I'm like a daddy's girl. So I took this as a sign that my dad was like saying, go do this, go get it. And I told 2 jokes in front of 400 people. And they all started laughing. And I was like, oh, snap. Okay. This is what the universe is telling me I need to do. And since then, I've done 8 shows. We're doing a show on Saturday at Bergamo's Theater. Saturday, oh my God, I almost said April 20th. Saturday, September 20th at Bergamo's Theater in New Haven. And, you know, I started in acting, right? And when people started clapping to the jokes, it was just like being on stage as an actress, you know? And because I can't physically, you know, there are comedians that are very physical. You know, Robin Williams was a very physical comedian. Because I can't do that, I have to rely on my characters or my voice or, you know, my head or my mouth or the ventilator, because I just wrote a joke about the ventilator. So I have to work differently, right? Because I'm differently able, right?
Well, and actually, before we go to break, I want to take a moment and bring Joy back, Joy Holder, who's the art director at the Art Connection Studio in Hartford. You've been listening to Crystal's story and her jokes, and I think you would agree with me that her energy is extremely palpable right now. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm so honored to be in your presence, an actor, writer, producer, and now comedian. I love that the trajectory of your life has taken on so many forms. And honestly, you've just been pretty much taking the hits and making something so beautiful out of it. It's really an honor to be sitting here next to you. And I would love to go to your comedy show. Hopefully the next one I can catch, since I'll be away this weekend. You're hilarious and beautiful, so it's so nice to be in your presence.
So the next one might be in my backyard.
Yeah, I'll be there.
We'll just put out chairs.
Drop the address.
No, we love a backyard party. I feel like
those are the best ones.
Yeah, that's a true story. And Crystal, like, I think like many people with disabilities, you've talked about facing ableism. You've also spoken out about facing racism. That's so much to unpack here. But how did these experiences impact you as an artist?
You know, Catherine, I am just like an alien, right? I'm like on an intergalactic journey. So there's lots of times when I don't allow anything, you know. You can be racist, that's your problem, right? I'm going to make it my problem, A, not to lower my vibration, to be where you are. Because if I lower my vibration to respond to you in that negative place, you want. Right, you won me over to be as ignorant as you are. So it's not like racism. I looked around like, oh yeah, let me go do that issue because it's racist or feminist. You know, my heart tells me what to do. You know, so even though I did a movie called Black Women in Medicine, right, and we did deal with the whole ism vortex. You know, I am a black woman with a disability. So I don't know which ism is always at work. So therefore, I go, you know what? I'm putting your ism over there, and I'm doing the crystal thing. You know, and the crystal thing is we're going to talk about it. So in my comedy, you know, I bring it up. You know, I said black people are the only people that, you know, can quit a job and get one the next day. Because you can always pick cotton and wash master's clothes, which is really true. I don't allow other people's ignorances to define who I am. And comedy allows you to do that, right? You can talk about very serious issues, and what you do is you lower people's defense mechanism, right? You lower it with a joke. And my jokes, you have to think about it afterwards. You go, wow, did she really say that she had her ankles on somebody's shoulders? Wait a minute, she's in a wheelchair. Wheelchair people don't do that, right? Or, I went out with this Asian guy, and, I went to visit him, and his grandmother saw me, and all of a sudden she could speak no English, just Chinese. But I know what a nigga is in Chinese, right? So you make a joke out of it, but you take the pain of it and you turn it into laughter. And then you present it to other people in a way that they can digest it. And that's what I do with comedy.
Well, it's amazing to see and witness where your heart has taken you since we're having this conversation today. And I feel like from previous conversations with other comedians and artists, it seems like there's a common thread here where no experiences is wasted leading up to this moment. So I'm interested to hear, how do you think about all of your prior, not just artistic experiences, but life experiences? How did all of that culminate into this moment?
Oh, that's a hard one.
I only ask hard questions.
That's a
here.
hard one. Your life is like everybody says life is a journey, right? There's some cliches. But you take this thread, right? And you start making something, you're weaving something. And you have colored thread, and you have plain thread, you have fancy thread, you got silk thread. And you're weaving a blanket that you don't even know is your life. And then you look at it and you go, wow, look at those colors over there. Wow, I ran out of thread over there. I had to borrow some new thread. And all of that colors, where I am today. I used to say to one of my spiritual teachers, I've lived enough for 20 people. Like, God, what am I going to do with all these stories? And I didn't, with the screenplay, you're writing one story, one main story and a sub-story, right? But with comedy, you could be over here and telling fat jokes, and I don't tell fat jokes, by the way. Or you could tell jokes about your grandma, or you could tell jokes about the racist guy that spit on you, or you could tell jokes about being intimate. When I tell a joke about intimacy, the audience stops laughing. Right? They literally stop laughing because they're like, oh my God, did that lady just say P-U-S-S-Y? Well, yeah, she did. And wow, she's going to say another word too. Which, Catherine, I'm not sure which words I can say here.
Yeah, I'll probably keep it safe here today.
Yeah.
But we catch the gist.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there's so many stories, as you can tell. I'm having a hard time kind of summarizing all of your life experiences, and I can't do that, obviously. But with all of the stories that you have shared and are continuing to share, it almost sounds like being an artist is not only your mission, but sort of a way of life and philosophy, and engaging in arts has kept you motivated to keep going. How do you stay motivated? Do you get burned out and have days where you're like, how do I continue to do this?
Oh my God, Tuesday, or we went everywhere. Saturday, we're like in Freddie Fixer, we're down in Greenwich, we're in Springfield over the weekend. We're just everywhere, right? And you get tired. But this is what I know. And I say this all the time. I know that there is a God. I know it because I am still alive. And that, according to my doctors, is impossible. B, I am a black person of African descent and American experience. My people survived the slave trade. They walked from North Carolina to Connecticut. I am going to get out of this damn bed and I am not going to complain because there are people that have nothing. There is somebody who can't walk, who doesn't have a wheelchair. So I don't have a right to be like, woe is me. Get up and figure it out. And some days I can't get up in bed, I'm not going to lie. But other days I am like, don't waste this breath. Don't waste this moment because it's a gift. And that is how I look at life. But that's how I always looked at life. So being a quadriplegic, is it like fun? And, Catherine, come over. We're going to play jacks. Well, Catherine, come over. We got to think of a creative way to play jacks. Yeah, yeah. Okay, give me that ball because you're cheating. So, you do what you have to do. But I wake up every day and I'm like, okay, I'm awake, God, what's up? What's on it? I always say, God, could you send me a memo? Could you send me an email? Text me, what am I supposed to be doing? Because this is the right thing. And then something happens in the universe. You meet somebody, you get a phone call. You get D.L. Hughley who says, okay, you could come back to the funny bone. I'll give you 8 minutes on stage. And you go, oh my God, I'm going to be on stage with D.L. Hughley. Oh God. So life is good.
I'm glad to hear.
Good.
Glad to hear life's good, and all I can think of is Jackson jokes with Crystal and Kat at some point. We got about a minute here, but and I think you expressed a lot of wisdom already just by that last conversation. But are there any more wisdoms that you hope to pass on to the next generation of artists?
Oh, I say this all the time. You have to be true to yourself. Do not sell yourself short. And I can't doesn't live here. Right? Don't say I can't. Because think of all the people that can. Think of Helen Keller. Your listeners might not even know who Helen Keller is. But, she was a blind deaf woman that went on to do these extraordinary things. Think of your family. A lot of people in Connecticut are immigrants. Second generation immigrants. What did your family have to go through to get you here? So don't waste it. Don't waste it. Everything has a purpose. And I got a purpose right now. Catherine, I am a comedian. And I'm killing it.
You are killing it. And we are, I think all of us around here today are so glad that we got out of bed this morning to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Crystal Emery, who's a filmmaker, author, and comedian. Extra emphasis on that. Thank you so much, Crystal, for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love Connecticut, where we live.
Well, thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you for your kind words. And Crystal will be performing this Saturday at the Brigham's Community Theater in New Haven. And you can learn more about Crystal's live performance on our website, ctpublic.org/wherewelive. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Jane Armatruda. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you all so much for listening, and don't waste it, everyone.